Enough talking. Why is a black woman this close to the border at night? Answer me now.
I've told you, visit with a friend heading home. I'm a retired judge.
Judge or not, you're hiding something. Keep your hands up. Don't move.
My hands are up. You're escalating without any cause. This is profiling.
That's it. Turn around.
The wind at the Arizona border carried sand like fine glass, scraping against car windows and nerves alike. She felt it before she saw it, authority tightening around her like a vise. A single flashlight beam cut through the dusk and landed on her face, lingering just a second too long. She'd spent 30 years upholding the Constitution, yet in that moment, a rookie with trembling hands and unchecked power decided she didn't belong. If stories like this matter to you, stories where power is tested, dignity is challenged, and truth fights its way to daylight, stay with me. This isn't just an incident. It's a map of how bias travels through institutions and what happens when someone finally pushes back. The desert light was fading into a muted amber when Marlene Carter approached the border checkpoint, her tires humming over the corrugated asphalt. Dusk in southern Arizona has a strange stillness, heat lingering in the air like an argument that refuses to cool, shadows stretching out in long, contemplative lines. She lowered her window slightly, letting the warm wind brush against her face. It smelled faintly of salt, dust, and the tired resignation of travelers waiting in slowly inching lines. She'd driven this route dozens of times, usually without incident. Retired Judge Marlene Carter knew the rhythms of checkpoints, the way officers leaned down to illuminate the inside of a car, the clipped phrasing of their questions, the polite but firm exchange that followed. After 30 years on the bench, she could sense when protocol was doing its work and when egos were doing its damage. Tonight, something felt off the moment she saw him. A lone rookie officer stood in the outer lane, pacing with restless energy, boots too clean, movements too abrupt. He tapped the side of his flashlight against his palm as though trying to discharge excess tension. The senior agents worked the busier lanes, their motions smooth and patterned, but the rookie stood apart like a live wire, with nowhere to release its charge. When he noticed her sedan inching forward, he stiffened, straightened his posture, and stepped directly into her lane with the authority of someone trying to prove he had some. His hand shot upward, signaling her to stop much earlier than necessary. She obeyed instantly, easing the car into neutral, hands still visible on the wheel. He approached slowly, the harsh flashlight beam slicing through the interior of her car. It lingered on her face, then her hands, then her documents resting on the passenger seat. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. No greeting, no explanation. Not even a question. Marlene blinked, surprised, but composed. "Officer, is there a reason for that request?" His jaw tightened. The beam trembled slightly. "I said step out." She'd seen this dynamic 100 times, from the bench uncertainty calcifying into aggression. The tone told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't responding to suspicion. He was responding to her questioning him. Marlene unbuckled her seatbelt with slow, deliberate movements. Of course, her voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd spent half her life weighing the tension between law and human behavior. She stepped out into the warm evening air, her shoes crunching lightly against the gravel. The rookie circled her car, flashlight bouncing across the hood in erratic sweeps. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Home," she replied. "Tucson." "You traveling alone?" "I am." His eyes narrowed, as though her answer confirmed something he had already decided. He gestured to her purse lying on the seat. "Whose bag is that?" "Mine." "You sure?" A small gust of wind moved across the lane, pushing sand against the asphalt like a soft hiss of disbelief. She breathed in slowly, grounding herself. "Yes, officer. It is." When she offered her ID, a state-issued judicial identification card the size of his palm, he barely glanced at it. The gold seal glinted under the flashlight, but he pushed it aside almost immediately, as if her identity complicated the narrative he was building. "What were you doing near the border today?" he asked next. "Visiting a friend in Nogales." "Name?" With respect, she said gently, "I don't see how that's relevant." His shoulders rose, tense and reactive. "Ma'am, you don't get to decide what's relevant, not here." Her silence was calm but firm, a silence that carried decades of courtrooms, decisions, and the weight of lived experience. The rookie mistook it for defiance. He motioned sharply. "I'm searching the vehicle." You don't have probable cause. I don't need probable cause at a border checkpoint, he snapped. But the crack in his voice betrayed uncertainty. He was quoting half-remembered training, the way rookies sometimes did when they felt power slipping through their fingers. The senior agent in the next lane paused mid-interview, eyes narrowing toward the exchange, but he didn't step in. Not yet. And as the rookie moved toward her car door, something in Marlene's chest tightened. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. She had felt this before, and she knew exactly where it could lead. He pulled her car door open with a force that felt performative, not procedural, the kind of gesture meant to reassert dominance rather than ensure safety. The hinges groaned under the sudden yank. Inside the vehicle, the interior light flickered on, illuminating the neat stack of folders on her seat, her reading glasses, and a water bottle lying on its side. Nothing out of place. Nothing suspicious, nothing that justified the hostility tightening the air around them. Yet the rookie's voice hardened. "Step back, ma'am." Farther. Marlene lifted her palms slightly, signaling compliance, and took 2 measured steps away from the vehicle. Her breathing remained slow, deliberate. She had testified to congressional panels, sentenced violent offenders, and presided over civil rights cases that made national news. But there was something uniquely unnerving about standing alone under the halogen lights of a remote checkpoint while a young officer, fueled by adrenaline and inexperience, acted as if he'd uncovered a threat. She watched him rifle through her belongings with careless hands, muttering under his breath. The search stretched longer than protocol permitted. She knew the guidelines well. Border searches allowed certain flexibilities, but even then, officers were expected to articulate reasoning, maintain professionalism, and above all, avoid harassment. The rookie was doing none of that. A car 2 lanes over stalled, drawing the senior agent's attention. He glanced again at the rookie, this time longer, more concerned. His hand hovered near his radio. For a moment, Marlene wondered if he might intervene. But whatever calculation he made, it ended with him staying put. A silence of institutional hesitation. The rookie emerged from her car abruptly. "Pop the trunk." "There isn't anything in the trunk except—" "Pop it," he repeated, voice rising. She pressed the key fob, listening to the latch click open in the quiet desert air. He disappeared behind the car, the trunk light glowing faintly against his silhouette. Seconds dragged. The wind picked up. A couple in the next lane slowed their conversation, eyes drifting toward the scene, sensing something wrong before understanding it. Then came the shift. Not an explosion, not a shout, just the sound of the rookie slamming her trunk harder than necessary. Too hard. The kind of slam that carried frustration, not procedure. He stepped back into view, chest heaving, face flushed, and for the first time since the stop began, he looked directly at her, though finally recognizing the weight of the person standing before him. "What exactly are you hiding?" he demanded. Marlene didn't flinch. "The truth," she said softly. The rookie's expression faltered, and somewhere behind him, the couple raised their phone recording. The rookie didn't notice the phone recording him, not at first. His focus stayed locked on Marlene, her posture, her calmness, her refusal to crumble under pressure. Something about her steadiness seemed to provoke him further, as if every measured breath she took undermined the authority he desperately wanted to feel. He stepped closer. Too close. The flashlight trembled in his hand again. "Ma'am, you're acting nervous," he said, voice laced with accusation rather than observation. "I am acting cautious," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." Her response seemed to strike a nerve. His jaw tightened, lips pulling into a thin line. She could almost hear the internal dialogue inside him. The training manuals battling. Pride, the fear of being challenged colliding with the intoxicating rush of power. Behind them, the couple's recording continued quietly, the phone angled discreetly just above the car window. The senior agent noticed now. His eyes shifted from the rookie to Marlene, then to the phone. Something in his posture changed, not enough to intervene, but enough to signal. He understood that the moment had slipped beyond the rookie's control. "Give me your full name," the rookie snapped. She met his gaze evenly. "I already did." "Give it again." Her voice remained steady. Marlene caught her. He paused. She watched the name register slowly, reluctantly. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition? No, not quite. It was the recognition of not recognizing something he should have known. A name spoken in government buildings, judicial conferences, appellate hearings. A name that carried weight in legal circles, but none of that mattered to him here. Spell it, he demanded. Officer, she said. Calmly, but firmly, your supervisory agent is right there. If you need confirmation of my identity, he has the authority to. I didn't ask him. His voice cracked into something brittle. I asked you. Silence pressed in from the desert, heavy and expectant. Marlene understood the psychology at play. She'd seen it from the bench far too many times. Fear disguised as bravado. Uncertainty masked by aggression. A rookie unsure of his role, sensing he was losing control of the situation, trying to reclaim it in all the wrong ways. She spelled her name slowly, each letter clear and deliberate. With each letter, the rookie's breathing grew sharper, agitation rising like heat from asphalt. Why are you really here? He pushed. Why'd you come through this checkpoint? You live north of here. He'd overplayed it. Border Patrol databases showed residency. That meant he had run a preliminary check and found nothing suspicious. He was improvising now, inventing suspicion where none existed. I told you the truth, she said. I visited a friend. That's all. Name the friend, he insisted again. Her expression remained neutral. No. The rookie took a step toward her, breath audible, eyes narrowing. You refusing to answer me? I'm refusing to indulge questions outside the scope of your authority, she said, each word quiet but razor sharp. He froze. It was the tone, not the words, the tone of a woman who had presided over federal hearings, who knew the architecture of the law better than he ever could. Something in him recoiled, not from her identity. He still didn't fully understand who she was, but from the realization that she had a deeper command of the rules he was breaking. You think you know the law, he scoffed. I've spent my life upholding it. There it was, not a boast, just truth, and it rattled him. The senior agent finally started walking toward them. But before he arrived, the rookie barked an order that shifted the entire energy of the scene. Put your hands behind your back. For the first time all evening, Marlene's breath caught, not out of fear, but out of the quiet, devastating knowledge that this rookie had no idea what line he had just crossed. For a moment, the world seemed to contract around the rookie's command. The hum of idling engines faded. Murmur of travelers blurred into a low atmospheric buzz. Even the desert wind held its breath. Marlene didn't move, not out of defiance, but disbelief. She searched his face for some sign of restraint, some hint that he grasped the gravity of what he just ordered. But his eyes were wild with a cocktail of fear and pride, the kind she'd witnessed in defendants who realized too late that they'd stepped beyond the reach of logic. The senior agent quickened his pace. Officer Reynolds. He called out, tone firm, controlled. But the rookie didn't hear him or refuse to. His focus stayed locked on Marlene, his voice sharpening. Hands behind your back. Now, Marlene inhaled slowly, feeling the air settle deep in her chest. She lifted her chin just a fraction, enough to reclaim space without provoking him further. Officer, she said softly, you need to think carefully about what you're doing. Her words weren't a threat, they were a lifeline. He didn't take it. I said now. He barked, reaching for the cuffs at his belt. And that was the moment everything shifted. The couple's phone, still recording, caught the senior agent's expression as he closed. The final steps between them, a look of shock, then recognition, then alarm. He grabbed the rookie's wrist before the young officer could pull the cuffs free. Reynolds, stand down, the senior agent ordered. No uncertainty, no negotiation, just the hard snap of authority finally stepping in. Reynolds jerked his arm back, startled. Sir, she's refusing. No. The senior agent cut in sharply. She asserted her rights. That is not refusal. That is constitutional law. The rookie blinked, chest rising and falling too quickly, his own training unraveling in real time. The senior agent turned to Marlene with a respectful nod. Ma'am, Judge Carter. Not a question. Not a guess. Recognition. Full and immediate. Reynolds staggered back a half step, his face draining of color. Judge. But the damage was done, carved into the air. Between them. The senior agent exhaled heavily, the weight of the moment settling over him. "Reynolds, you need to step away from this vehicle." "Sir, now." For the first time all evening, the rookie obeyed. He backed away slowly, hands trembling, realizing what Marlene had known from the beginning. He had crossed a line that training couldn't defend, and protocol couldn't erase. As the senior agent began speaking with Marlene quietly, professionally, the rookie stared at the ground, breathing hard. The distant thrum of the desert wind sounding suddenly like the beginning of consequences he could no longer outrun. And from across the lane, the recording phone captured every second. The recording began almost accidentally, a couple waiting in the next lane, bored from the long line of cars and the slow crawl toward inspection. At first, their camera caught nothing more than the rhythm of brake lights and the dull glow of the checkpoint lamps. But when voices rose sharp, clipped, unmistakably tense, the woman held her phone a little higher, curiosity blending into instinct. "I think you should get this," she whispered to her partner. So the lens tilted, settling on the rookie officer, confronting Marlene Carter. The phone's microphone picked up his agitation clearly, the rising tremor in his commands, the brittle edge in his tone. From where they stood, the couple couldn't hear every word, but the energy was unmistakable. Something was unfolding that didn't belong in a routine checkpoint lane. The woman zoomed in. "He's shaking," she murmured. "Why is he shaking? Why is he yelling at her?" Her partner replied. The camera caught the moment. The rookie ordered Marlene to place her hands behind her back. The couple exchanged a horrified look. The woman's hand tightened around the phone, knuckles whitening. "What is he doing?" she whispered. "I don't know. Keep recording." The checkpoint air had shifted. Travelers sensed the change before they understood it. Conversations dimmed. Engines hummed, muted by the atmosphere of unease. Even the local dogs, lean, desert stray mutts lingering near the outer fencing, went still, ears tilting toward the tension. The senior agent's intervention came into frame just as the rookie reached for the cuffs. The camera captured the senior agent's hand closing around the rookie's wrist, the sudden halt in the rookie's motion, the shock in his posture. It captured the exact second when authority reasserted itself, not with force, but with the quiet discipline of someone who knew the rules and understood when they had been broken. Then came the recognition. "Ma'am, Judge Carter." The phone trembled slightly as the couple absorbing the gravity of what they'd just heard. "Judge Carter?" the woman whispered. "She's a judge?" "Retired, I think," her partner said, his voice soft with disbelief. "I've heard that name on the news." The camera stayed trained on Marlene's face, composed, dignified, a deep fatigue settling into her eyes. The tension in her shoulders told a story the microphone didn't need to capture, not just the fear of the moment, but the heaviness of experiencing a pattern she'd spent years writing opinions about. And then, almost imperceptibly, the rookie unraveled. The camera caught everything: the trembling hands, the faltering stance, the frantic attempt to recalibrate himself after realizing exactly who he had wronged. He sputtered half-formed excuses, his voice shrinking into fragments. The senior agent shut him down with a single raised hand. From the couple's vantage point, the scene felt like watching a system split open, revealing the raw nerves beneath the surface. The woman holding the phone swallowed hard. "This isn't just wrong," she whispered. "This is going to follow him for the rest of his life." Her partner nodded, the gravity settling on both of them. And it should. The rookie retreated out of frame, his silhouette small against the harsh checkpoint lights. The camera caught him pacing, hands on his head, the collapse of confidence audible even without words. Then, as though drawn by some quiet moral instinct, the woman holding the phone raised it a little higher, capturing both the rookie retreating and Marlene standing resolute beneath the halogen glare. "What if she hadn't stayed calm?" she murmured. Her partner exhaled. "What if we hadn't been here to film it?" Their video, shaky, imperfect, yet devastatingly clear, had just captured the truth in real time. And the truth was about to travel far beyond the desert. The senior agent guided Marlene toward the shadowed side of the checkpoint, away from the cluster of cars still creeping forward. The air felt cooler here, quieter, though the tension clung to the space like a residue that refused to dissipate. He spoke to her in a low voice, apologetic without slipping into theatrics. Judge Carter, I am truly sorry. What happened should not have happened. She nodded, not with acceptance, but acknowledgement. I understand, she said softly, but apologies don't restore protocols. Her words hit him with a weight he didn't try to deflect. Meanwhile, the rookie Reynolds paced near the inspection booth, body language fractured. His radio buzzed faintly at his shoulder, but he didn't reach for it. His hands kept lifting, then falling, then lifting again, as if searching for a version of the moment that could be undone. He looked young suddenly, painfully young, the bravado that fueled his earlier aggression evaporating in the glare of consequence. The couple kept recording from their lane, not aggressively, not intrusively, just documenting quiet witnesses who understood the gravity of impartial eyes. The senior agent finally approached Reynolds. Reynolds, he said not unkindly, you need to step inside. Now. Reynolds swallowed hard. Sir, I thought she was, I didn't know who she, that's the point. The senior agent cut in. You don't treat people differently because you know who they are. You treat them correctly because the law requires it. Reynolds blinked rapidly, as if the words stung more than the reprimand. Inside the checkpoint office, glass walls rattled with the hum of old air conditioning units. The senior agent made a brief call protocol, mandatory reporting, the kind of conversation agencies dread but cannot avoid. Marlene waited outside the office, hands clasped, breathing steady, though her thoughts churned beneath her calm exterior. She knew how these reports read. She had presided over disciplinary hearings, reviewed misconduct cases, dissected procedural failures line by line. But being the subject, not the adjudicator, felt surreal. The office door opened. The senior agent stepped out, face tightened by the bureaucratic machinery he'd already set in motion. Judge Carter, Internal Affairs, has been notified. They'll want your statement. And the footage from the bystanders. Her gaze drifted back to the couple, still recording, still silently bearing witness. This video, he said quietly, changes everything. And in that single sentence, she heard the shift from incident to evidence, from misconduct to national story. The camera had turned. And so would the country. By morning, the desert sky was washed in a pale, indifferent blue, but the video had already traveled far beyond Arizona. It started small, shared in a neighborhood Facebook group, or posted by a local teacher, stitched on TikTok by a civil rights activist who recognized the unmistakable tone of racial profiling. Overnight, the clip crossed state lines faster than any officer could file a report. Inside her Tucson home, Marlene watched it all unfold with an unsettling sense of déjà vu. She'd seen other people's stories rise like this grainy footage, a tense encounter, a public reckoning building in real time. But seeing herself on screen, calm under pressure, facing a young officer's escalating aggression, it put a knot in her chest that even decades on the bench hadn't prepared her for. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Old colleagues, former clerks, attorneys she'd mentored. Each message carried some version of the same sentiment. I'm so sorry. Are you all right? What do you need? But one call stood out, chief counsel for the Arizona Civil Rights Initiative. Marlene, he said, no preamble. We saw the footage. We need to talk. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. I figured as much. He didn't sugarcoat a thing. This is no longer just an internal affairs matter. The rookie violated 2 constitutional standards at minimum. Border authority or not, he stepped outside protocol. And because you are who you are, the ramifications will be federal. She opened her eyes, staring at the paused video on her laptop, her hands raised calmly. The rookie's face twisted in tension. This isn't about who I am, she said. It's about what he did. Both can be true, he replied. The Department of Justice reached out by noon. A supervisory agent from the Office for Civil Rights requested a preliminary interview. She met them at a neutral site downtown, a small federal building with glass walls, sterile lighting, and that familiar hum of quiet bureaucratic gravity. The conference room felt both clinical and charged, the air scented faintly with old paper and institutional carpet. 2 DOJ representatives sat across from her. One took notes by hand. The other watched her carefully, gauging not credibility, she had that in spades but trauma. Federal interviews didn't usually show that kind of human concern. They began with procedure, timestamps, officer positioning, sequence of commands, statutory authorities allowing border inspection. Every detail mattered. Then they shifted. Judge Carter, the lead rep, said gently, "At any point did you feel you were being detained because of your race?" Her gaze drifted to the window where a sliver of sunlight cut across the table, sharp and uninvited. "Yes," she said, "and I felt it early." The rep nodded slowly, painfully, because they both knew what that meant. Under federal review, racial bias wasn't just misconduct. It was a structural failure. As the interview continued, a notification buzzed on the rep's tablet. She glanced at it, eyebrows narrowing before she angled the screen away. Marlene didn't need to see it. The video was going national. Back at the checkpoint, the senior agent was already giving his own statement to Internal Affairs, calm, factual, unembellished. But even he could feel the shift in the air. What had begun as one rookie's poor judgment was now woven into a larger narrative. Bias, authority, accountability, and the price of getting all three wrong. And in a quiet house in suburban Tucson, Marlene felt the same shift, like distant thunder rolling toward her, a storm no longer avoidable. The DOJ interview ended just after 3 p.m. Though the emotional weight lingered like a bruise beneath the surface, the representatives thanked her, shook her hand with unusual sincerity, and gathered their files with the solemn urgency of people who understood the scope of what they were carrying. As Marlene stepped into the hallway, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass steady. Posture, composed face, but eyes carrying a heaviness she hadn't allowed herself to name. Not fear, not anger, something quieter, something older, exhaustion. Outside, the Arizona heat wrapped around her like a familiar blanket, thick and intrusive. She walked to her car slowly, feeling the sting of sunlight against her skin. Reporters had begun gathering near the building's outer gate, not a mob, but enough to signal that the story had left the confines of Border Patrol bureaucracy and entered the arena of public consequence. One called out, "Judge Carter, do you believe the officer targeted you because of your race?" She didn't stop walking. "I believe the footage speaks for itself." She closed her door gently, shutting out the flurry of shouted questions, the clicking cameras, the sudden frenzy of a system scrambling to make sense of what it could no longer contain. Across town, Internal Affairs had placed Reynolds on administrative leave pending formal review. He sat in a small, windowless office, hands clasped between his knees, replaying every second of the encounter in his mind. The more he remembered, the more he realized how deeply he'd failed not just protocol, not just law, but the very foundation of the job he'd sworn to uphold. His supervisor spoke quietly from the doorway. "Reynolds, this is serious. Very serious." Reynolds lifted his eyes, red-rimmed from hours of staring at nothing. "I didn't mean to." Intent, the supervisor interrupted, doesn't erase impact. The young officer lowered his head again. Meanwhile, at the DOJ field office, the video was cued for analysis frame by frame, voice by voice, second by second. Two federal attorneys murmured over the footage, pausing at critical moments discussing case law, referencing procedural manuals, diagnosing each lapse of judgment with chilling clarity. "This is going to escalate," one said quietly. "It already has," the other replied. And in her home, lights dimmed, Marlene sat alone on her living room couch, listening to the distant hum of evening traffic. She folded her hands, letting the silence settle around her. She had spent her career believing systems could correct themselves if pushed hard enough. Now, she was watching that correction begin, not through her rulings, not through her courtroom, but through a video she never intended to star in. The law had finally met the lens, and the fallout was only beginning. Courtrooms sound different when you're not the one presiding over them. They carry a kind of charged stillness, a hum of expectation that fills the air. Long before the judge enters, long before the clerk announces the docket, Marlene felt that hum settle into her bones as she sat quietly on the second row, her hands folded neatly over her lap. It had been months since the incident, months of interviews, filing, counterfilings, bodycam analysis, and administrative hearings. Misconduct cases moved slowly, grinding through layers of bureaucracy, but this one never lost momentum. The video wouldn't let it. The public wouldn't let it. The DOJ certainly didn't. And now, in a federal courthouse room bathed in soft yellow light, Officer Jacob Reynolds, 20, 4 years old, 1 year on the job, and forever changed, took his seat at the witness stand. He looked smaller than he had at the checkpoint. The uniform had been replaced with a plain button-down shirt. His hair was neatly trimmed, but his shoulders slumped, weighed down by something more permanent than administrative leave. His eyes flicked toward Marlene for a split second, then quickly away, as though her presence reminded him of a version of himself he wished he could undo. The attorney approached him with slow, methodical steps. "Officer Reynolds, when you initiated the search of Judge Carter's vehicle, were you acting under standard Border Patrol protocol?" Reynolds swallowed. "I believed I was." "Believed," the attorney repeated softly. "But as we've established, the handbook requires articulable suspicion before extending a search beyond basic inspection, correct?" Reynolds nodded, throat tight. "Yes." "And did you have articulable suspicion?" A long pause. "No." The courtroom didn't stir. There was no gasp, no murmur, no movement. Just silence, the kind that draws lines between what was done and what should have been. The attorney continued, voice gentle but unyielding. "Officer Reynolds, did Judge Carter comply with your instruction?" Another pause. "Yes." "And did you escalate the encounter unnecessarily?" A tremor moved through his jaw. "Yes." The attorney stepped back, giving the weight of the admission room to settle. Reynolds shifted in his seat, fingers tightening around the wooden edge of the stand. "I didn't know who she was," he whispered. "I didn't know she was a judge." Marlene didn't look away. The words stung because they revealed a truth she had wrestled with since that night. Recognition shouldn't matter. The law wasn't supposed to bend according to status, but he said it anyway, as though her title, not her humanity, made the harm legible. The attorney let the silence stretch before asking, "Officer Reynolds, would you have treated her differently if you had known?" Reynolds blinked rapidly, trapped between honesty and self-preservation. I don't know." The courtroom felt the weight of that answer too. Meanwhile, on the opposite bench, agency supervisors shifted uncomfortably. Policymakers who once viewed misconduct as an internal issue were now forced to confront its public cost. The video hadn't just revealed a single officer's actions. It exposed cracks in their training protocols, their oversight, their culture of silent witness. A DOJ representative sat near the aisle, a folder of recommendations on her lap. Federal mandates were coming. New training requirements, revised checkpoint procedures, a structural overhaul of escalation protocols. The consequences would echo far beyond this room. The judge called for a brief recess. As the gavel sounded softly against the wood, Marlene rose, feeling a familiar ache move through her hands. She wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the sharp, immediate way anger shows itself. What she felt now was heavier, quieter, a kind of mourning, not for the rookie, not even for herself, but for the system she had devoted her life to shaping, now confronting its own reflection. And in that reflection, she saw both the wound and the possibility of repair. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere felt subtly changed. The tension was still present, but it had shifted, less sharp, less defensive, more resigned to the truth that had already settled into the room like fine dust. The judge took his seat. The gallery quieted. The verdict, when it came, was delivered with measured clarity. Officer Reynolds was found liable for unlawful detention, unreasonable search, and violation of civil rights under color of authority. The judgment, $10 million in compensatory and punitive damages, landed with a weight that felt almost unreal in its magnitude. Gasps rippled across the courtroom, followed by a long, stunned silence. Reynolds bowed his head, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. Not dramatic, not performative, just the quiet collapse of someone realizing the enormity of what he had done and the life-altering consequences that would follow him forever. But the courtroom's energy didn't focus on punishment alone. Because the judgment wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything that had to change. Within days, the Border Patrol Agency announced sweeping reforms, new mandatory de-escalation modules, quarterly bias assessments, supervisory presence requirements at every fixed checkpoint, and the implementation of independent oversight during all prolonged detention. Policies that had been stagnant for years were suddenly rewritten with urgency. The DOJ issued a formal advisory memorandum citing Marlene's case as a defining example of why federal training must be rebuilt from the ground up. What happened in the desert wasn't framed as a simple mistake, it was recognized as a structural failure. In the quiet after the verdict, Marlene stepped outside the courthouse, greeted not by reporters or cameras, but by the soft rustle of evening wind moving through the plaza trees. Sunlight filtered through the branches, laying fractured patterns across the pavement. She paused there, standing in the golden spill of late afternoon, letting the weight of the moment settle into her. Justice, she knew, was never clean. It wasn't triumph or vindication. It was a slow, imperfect act of recalibration, a collective attempt to restore balance to something that should never have tipped in the first place. Her former clerk approached cautiously. "Judge Carter, how do you feel?" She considered the question carefully. "Not victorious," she said, her voice soft. "Just relieved that the truth was seen." Her clerk nodded, eyes shining with respect. "Your restraint made this possible." Marlene looked out at the plaza, ordinary people walking, talking, living unaware of the case that would shape their protections in the years to come. "No," she said quietly. "Accountability made this possible." As she began her walk toward the parking lot, the desert breeze lifted again, gentler this time, almost like a release, not triumph, not defeat. Just the fragile space left behind when something unjust is finally confronted. She felt tired, yes, but she also felt something else. The faint, steady hum of a country recalibrating itself. One truth, one video, one reckoning at a time. And for the first time since that night at the checkpoint, the air around her felt lighter.